All right. So here comes video number 2 because our tech guy decided that we were going to do the first video on Zoom instead of Skype, which doesn't have a time limit. So we're going to blame the tech guy for this today. I'm not the tech guy, in case anyone has ever met me before and thinks that I can do anything on a computer. Um,
Yeah,
so
don't
this
worry,
one is
we'll
going to be
fire him.
specifically, we will not, unless somebody else wants to take that position. Um, Anybody volunteers, any single person. But anyway, we are now going to do what this was actually supposed to be about, which is the draft itself and how that impacts Dynasty in general, not necessarily our league. The first little while was just a little bit more about our league, but again, we're going to do way more in depth about that at some point in the future. This is going to be, we're going to go through position by position. Stopping at kind of points that we've decided and then maybe hitting on some other players just that we like further down the list. But hopefully you guys find this a little bit entertaining. It's just kind of going to be two guys who know not very much about football talking about football, and especially draft stuff. But it's basically just Mel Kiper. We're not any different. We just don't write it on paper like he does. All right. So let's start with everyone's favorite position. We're talking quarterbacks. Got to start with the number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young, Alabama baby. Nick Saban gets his guy to the top again. I don't know what your thoughts on Bryce Young are, but you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, I love Bryce Young. I thought he was. I would have taken him first too. If I had to pick, I would have taken him first out of these guys. I think he's been awesome his whole career. Get that he's small, but I don't know. I'd rather a small good player than a big bad player. So
I'm going to be interested to see about what you say when the number 3 quarterback we talk about then happens. But yeah, I mean, I think the Panthers went out and got their guy. I don't care what anybody else thinks. They got the guy they wanted. They sold the house to go get him. Um, if he works out, that's wonderful. If he doesn't, that's a really big problem. I love the fit with Frank Reich. I mean, he was a QB. He was the man. Fun Frank Reich fat. At one point, he had the largest comeback in college and NFL history. Just a fun fact about Frank Reich. But anyway, they put some pieces around him, adding Miles Sanders, Thielen, DJ Shark, getting Hayden Hurst. I think they've given him a chance to be pretty good. Their offensive line looked okay last year, especially in the run game. You hit on it. Size is the big question. Come dynasty drafts, I'm shocked if he gets to 3. That's not true. I'm shocked if he gets to 4. I'll say maybe there's a draft where someone goes running back, one of the other QBs. I just can't see him getting to 4. Like, he can't get past 4.
yeah, I mean, I could see it. Really depends on how you look at the situation. I definitely think. I guess I'd say Stroud's probably the safest out of the guys, and then Richardson probably has the highest upside. So I don't know if that's how people look at things, but yeah, I mean, I think he was the best. I think he was the best prospect NFL wise. So I think it makes sense he went 1. I guess I'm not as high on the help as you are, but
So
yeah, I think he's going to have some trouble at the start. I like the offensive line, so I think that's really important, especially if you're talking about a small quarterback. I think he has shown that he can avoid the rush himself as well. So
no, and I think to clarify my thoughts on his weapons are, I don't think they're necessarily the best weapons in the world, but he's got professionals who know what to do and know how to get open. I think Thielen is a huge veteran guy. I mean, they paid him whatever, way too much, but that's a whole different argument. That's for their front office to figure out, not for us. But you mentioned him. We'll move on to number 2 QB, CJ Stroud. I'll start on this one. CJ was my guy. CJ was my QB pick. He is the prototype of a guy I want. He was the one. I thought he was the prospect. I know they settled on for doing it. Texans got the guy. Their offensive coordinator, they're bringing in from Kyle Shanahan's group in San Francisco, which I think says a lot of great things. I like their running game. They brought in Woods. They have Michi, who's looking like he's going to be playing this year. Dalton Schultz is a safety net. I think he's a better pick than Young. Again, dynasty-wise, I think you do pick Young over Stroud at this point in time. But NFL-wise, Stroud was the guy. But I think Young is the guy you pick over Stroud. Theoretically, I think Stroud ends up being that 5th pick in most dynasty drafts because I do think people are going to jump Richardson over him.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. Obviously, Stroud's had a lot of help receiver-wise over his career, which is nice. I think Bryce Young's kind of shown doesn't really matter who you put around him quite as much as Stroud. But Stroud's definitely prototype. He's tall, big arm, all the stuff you really want. Little worried about weapons down there. And offensive line isn't great, which is hard for a young quarterback. So I think I'll have maybe a little growing pains. I think all these guys probably have some growing pains coming, but I think, yeah, I don't think you could go wrong picking him. I don't see a situation where like in 3 years they're like, wow, like he was just terrible.
No, I agree completely. I think you hit it on the head before. He's the safe choice. I think your thoughts are correct, and that's why I do think that he ends up being the 5th pick in Dynasty. He may be my favorite of the 3, but I think he ends up being 5. And here, the reason why is the next guy we're going to talk about, Anthony Richardson. I will be real. I get the Josh Allen comparisons. I really like Anthony Richardson, but he scares the crap out of me as a football player. The physical traits are nuts. They're there. Everyone knows they're there. You draft him. I think there's a good chance he doesn't start for half of the first season, so you have to be okay with that. He's only started 13 games ever. That's not a full NFL season. Ever. That's terrifying. He's got the boomer bust potential. It's there. Having Jonathan Taylor is going to make his life as an NFL quarterback lovely. People love the upside, especially in Dynasty. I mean, the running ability that he has is crazy. I think, I mean, none of these QBs, I think, fall out of the top 5 in picks. But he may end up being the first QB taken off the board in a lot of drafts just because that upside is so crazy. I tell you what, if he was sitting on the board at 11, I don't know if I pick him. But I think I'm in the rarest of rare minorities there. As a person, I think it's fine. But like, I'm just so scared by some of the things that come out with his numbers. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Colts got their guy for the next 15 years. But man, he scares me.
Well, I can guarantee you there's no shot in the world he'll last till 11 for you. And I think it's crazy you wouldn't take him there. But I think I
would, but like I think about it.
Yeah, I would be smashing that. He's picked 4th overall. The thing is, like, quarterbacks are so rare, and he's gonna get a shot. You're not picking someone 4th overall and just like he's never gonna see the field. So if you're gonna get a quarterback that was picked 4th overall, just the amount of team commitment means to me that he has to go top 6 at the least.
He's going top 5. Draft capital is there that he's going to go top 5. These are 3 of the top 5 picks in every dynasty draft that is super flex in the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they all have their own. None of them are the same, and one's just better than the other. I think they're all very different and very interesting. So I'm interested to see where they go, especially where they go with maybe a running back that's coming up soon, where he falls. So it should be very interesting. And I think the next guy is also super interesting as well.
And now we're getting into the guy who has like the most, what the heck, where does he fall? Because, I mean, that's what happened in the goes, where the heck do you jump on drafting him? You know he's not starting day one. I think, but he fell into like a pretty nice situation. Tannehill maybe he sits a year, but he's there. I think they signaled that Malik Willis is not their future with this pick, which seeing him last year I think makes sense, but is tough. They gave him 3 starts and almost said his NFL career is over. I'm going to say that he missed out on the first round of the NFL. There's no way he goes to the second round in our draft. There's no chance. I think maybe he falls into that 6 through 9 area in most dynasty drafts. And I think hasn't every mock draft that I've kind of just scrolled through, it's not the case. He is falling. But I don't think he falls that far in ours.
Yeah, I mean, sucks that he's not in the first round. Rumors are said that people have tried to trade up towards the end of the first round to get him. Who knows if that's true? I think a lot of rumors that come out of the NFL draft are nonsense, so I don't really believe that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of potential for him. Mel Kiper loves him. If you're a Mel Kiper guy, he loves Will Levis. So if that's part of your draft process, you should go get Will Levis. Yeah, I see him going middle to end. What was that?
Who the hell is Mel Kiper? Still one of the best videos ever from the Colts GM 20 years ago. But Will Levis has all the potential to be a really good player. Just know that you're drafting a guy that puts mayo in his coffee, which is okay. But he's got a lot of potential. Clearly not as good as Sean Clifford, who took his starting spot at the great Penn State University, which is just crazy to say out loud. But he is maybe the most interesting person in the draft.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him as a person, but and I don't personally like him very much, but I think there are plenty of reasons to like him. And obviously, I'm bad at fantasy because I didn't make the playoffs, so maybe you should go draft Will Levis.
All right. We're moving on to our next quarterback, and the last quarterback we're really kind of doing a deep dive on, Hendon Hooker. Detroit got him in the 3rd round. I love Hendon. I loved Hendon when he was at Tennessee. I know he's not the starter. I think they signal he's not the starter, but I don't know how they're going to handle Goff in the future. I think he had one really solid year last year, but people were writing him off, and people still kind of wrote him off now. I'm going to compare him to how I felt about Sam Howell last year. Sam Howell was a guy that I loved before the draft, thought that the place he ended up was actually pretty good for him, and I jumped on Sam Howell in our Superflex draft last year. And they're not similar players or anything of that nature. It's just positioning and where they get drafted. I think he probably shouldn't fall out of the 2nd round of our draft. But I don't think he's a 1st round pick.
Yeah, I mean, 3rd round NFL draft pick probably means he's not a 1st round dynasty pick. Liked him. Don't think he starts the year, or maybe he's ready for week 1, but he hasn't really trained at that point. Obviously, coming off the ACL, maybe he has a slow first year, and maybe they're looking more into next year. But I also think the ACL probably dropped him into the 3rd round. So maybe he's really a 2nd round quarterback, not a 3rd round quarterback in NFL draft pick wise. But yeah, obviously he had a great year last year with Hyatt, and has some potential. Obviously he's a little old. I think he's like 24. So maybe that's something to hold against him. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, once you start getting towards the middle end of 2nd round, you just got to go pick your guy. So if Hendon Hooker's your guy, you got to just go get him.
Yeah, no, and I think someone should take a flyer on Hendon Hooker. I mean, you have a taxi spot. He's a taxi spot player for a year. And you see what the Lions do with Goff. I think his talent's there. I think there's a chance he turns into an NFL player. But I think that he's a flyer. Maybe he gets into the 3rd round, but last half round. I think maybe second round is where he goes in our draft. But now I think moving past some quarterbacks, I'm just going to name a few on the list that I have strong feelings about. Stetson Bennett, I do not get that pick. I think that was a terrible pick. I am sorry, but that dude is not an NFL quarterback. The 4th round for that guy is crazy. He's like 37 years old. He played like 8 years in college. No. Aiden O'Connell was great last year, but moving on. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is someone who I really, really like and think is a steal in the 5th round. I think that they can do a lot with him. I don't know necessarily what you can do with him. He's a backup quarterback, but he has the ability, I think, to do some more. And then, you got Sean Clifford, which is a crazy pick, and he's like 3 years older than Julian Love. And then Max Duggan getting picked at the end of the year, even after end of the 7th, even after his great year at TCU. Anybody else you wanted to touch on or had different feelings about? I think that's just how we go through those.
No, I think that was fine. I mean, I think you got to remember that the Rams haven't drafted in the last 5 years, so they're a little rusty with the Stetson Bennett pick. They really haven't had any picks for the last 7 years anyway, so just remember that.
Okay, sure. That gives them off the hook for like, oh my God. Anyway, moving on to running back. Starting with the guy. I mean, Bijan Robinson is the guy that that's when I started tanking. Bijan Robinson is the guy I wanted. I thought I would still be in tank mode by the time this draft came around. He's been great since day one. I think there's a little bit of fear just how much workload he got at Texas. I think he's starting off at a higher point than some other guys were. But he's the most talented guy in this class. If you want to go QB instead of running back in a super flex, I'm okay with that. But Biondi, you got a guy, and I don't, or maybe someone offers Biondi a crazy trade, he moves up to 1. He should be 1 in every draft in the country. He goes to a team that ran the ball a crazy amount last year. I don't love the QB situation. I think they can stack the box against Atlanta, which I don't love. I don't know if Ritter takes the pressure off that run game. I don't get this pick on the Falcons' point of view. I just don't get it. I don't see running back at 8, even though I love Bijan so much. I don't. They had so many needs, and I just don't see where he fits for them. But I'll let you take over talking about Bijan.
Yeah, it's a weird pick and a weird landing spot. I mean, Atlanta, like, the last 3 years, I just don't know what they're doing. Like, Pitts at 4, and then London at 5, and now Bijan at 8. And it's like, are you ever going to, like, really solve quarterback ever? But, like, at the same time, like, I don't know. You got maybe the best player in the draft, so maybe it works out. Maybe. I think stacking the box on them probably hard. I mean, it's probably hard to guard both London and Pitts if you're stacking the box. And I don't know. I mean, it's a tough spot, I'd say. I do like, well, I think Algier had a great year last year, so I was a little surprised they went so hard to get Bijan. Would have been, I thought Bijan probably ended up at Detroit before the draft started, just the way things were looking. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Bijan, obviously amazing player, so I don't know if we should spend too much time on him. But, yeah, he's awesome. It's a little weird situation-wise, but you still got to draft him.
I think realistically, Bijan's at the very worst, like a top 5 pick in a Superflex dynasty everybody draft right now. But moving on to the next running back that was chosen, we have Mr. Gibbs in Detroit. You were just talking about the Lions, so I'll let you take over this one.
We have an odd amount of Lions fans in this dynasty league because we have 2, and that's odd.
Who's the second?
Taint is a Lions fan, in case you didn't know that.
I did not.
Yeah. That's wild. So Taint's a Lions fan. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously they loved Gibbs by how they reacted during the draft. obviously they didn't love Swift, so moved on from him. They were talking about using him in the slot a lot. I find that to be kind of interesting. I mean, they just paid Mont a ton of money, so I guess you have to kind of use Mont. But at the same time, like, if you're going to use 112 on a running back, like, you got to use him as a running back too, I would think. I love Gibbs, super fast, super twitchy. I mean, definitely a kind of running back you want in Dynasty, catch a lot of passes, can kind of do. Obviously, he's not a power back, he's pretty small, but other than that, a lot of explosive plays, and behind a great offensive line, so I like the landing spot for him.
Yeah, no, I think the landing spot for him was great, but I think of any player in the draft, he had the biggest rise in stock. Being picked with that draft capital at 12 in a good situation, his capital, woof. I mean, I think there is he should have never gone past 5. I think there's an argument now he doesn't get past way quicker than 5. I mean, I think realistically he could be a number 1 pick in a draft if it wasn't the same year Bijan Robinson came out. I think last year he's probably number 1. He goes before Breece. I think easily. Now maybe Demont takes some production away from him, but I'm with you. I think the person that got the most lucky out of this is Mr. Lamb Chop, because that 5th pick just became way more valuable. Because if he falls to the 2nd round, I can see going one of those QBs, 2 of those QBs before him. You know that top 5 pick is so much more valuable than 6. Those top 5 is where you hit that line. Last year, the top 2 was where you hit that line. The year before that, it was, I think actually it was a little deeper. The year before that was a really good draft. I mean, but he is elite, and I love it. And I think it's a great placement. I don't know if I make that pick if I'm Detroit, but that's not my call. Good for Taint and Sean.
Their weapons are wild, though. Jameson, Amon-Ra.
Well,
Gibbs.
Not so much Jameson. Jameson being gone is a problem.
What do you mean?
Jameson Williams suspended.
Is he? Oh, yeah. Forgot about that. Yeah, he's only suspended like 5 games now, right?
I think it was 8.
Okay. I may be wrong.
I could very well be wrong. But let's move on to Zach Charbonnet, the 3rd running back taken. I have much to say about this.
I give you the floor. Go ahead.
So, and you talked about Mel Kiper before. Mel Kiper was just on my TV like an hour ago talking about how the Seahawks won the draft. This was my least favorite pick in this draft by so much. I love Charbonnet. I think Charbonnet is a great player. I don't get it. You go up and get a 2nd round pick to be a backup running back to Kenneth Walker, who's a 2nd-year player who you just used draft capital to get on another running back. I mean, I don't get it. I think he was easily a 1st round dynasty pick before being put on Seahawks. I don't touch him for a while and into the 2nd round now. I don't get it. The Seahawks it bothered me. I don't understand it. I didn't really understand the Njigba pick either, but we can talk about that later. I don't get it. This was the worst pick in the draft. The only close one was Stetson Bennett, and I've already talked about that one. But this was a 2nd round pick, which made it worse.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't know. It almost feels like they kind of cannibalize each other's value. Those two. Like Charbonnet's gonna get used. They just used a 2nd round pick on him. He's gonna get work, which means Walker's not getting all the work, which he was towards the end of last year. I love Walker. I think he's one of the more talented runners in the league. Not sure about the passing. I know Pete Carroll's such a weird guy. Like, his explanation after the draft was that he really liked the way Zach Charbonnet caught screens. And I was like, okay. So, not really sure. Kind of a head-scratching pick, and why it's really hard. Like, running back's so tough because there's just so many, and like if someone gets drafted and is gonna get work, like it just really hurts your running back's value. So I don't know, just tough pick. Still think they both have some a lot of value, but it was tough.
And so I think with draft is has so much capital. Biani maybe wants to trade back into somewhere and go get Charbonnet. He may want to handcuff Walker, and I think it may be pretty valuable for him to do so. So I think Biani's got to figure out where he thinks Charbonnet is going and get before that with his assets. He should draft Charbonnet, and I think, and if he doesn't, he should be trading for Charbonnet. I hate handcuffing. This is the rare situation to do it because you have a second-year guy and a first-year guy who both have draft capital, who both need to be on the field. I do not understand it, but we're going to move on to Kendre Miller because I'm just angry. So moving on to Kendre Miller, this is another guy who people are really, really high on. I think he's a good player, but I hate where he got picked. He's a third string running back. Maybe he's a second string running back, depending on how you feel about Williams. But Williams is a touchdown stealer. We saw that all year last year. He's going to score that touchdown. And then there's Kamara, who I'm not like totally done with. I know I said some not so great things about him in our video before, but like he's still Alvin Kamara. He's still got a few years left. Maybe it's just 1 year, but I don't get going running back that early after getting Williams and still having Kamara on your team. I think that really hurts his dynasty value. I do think he could sneak himself into some first rounds, just like Charbonnet is going to as well. But I think he can easily get into the first round of most picks. I think he hurts values of Williams, he hurts values of Kamara, and he hurts his own value by being there as well because now you have 3 running backs.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, this pick just means that they're moving off of Kamara after this year, I guess. So yeah, maybe it's a more of a running back pick for next year, which is a tough thing to do anyway. But also we still have to deal. Kamara probably still gets suspended, so maybe he gets some work during that time, and then Kamara comes back, gets some work, and then it's off to the races the year after. Something like that. Like the prospects, I think all the prospects from here on out are kind of interesting, but also like toss up. Like you don't really know what's going to end up happening. It really depends on how much work they end up getting.
Yeah, no, and I think everything you say makes a whole bunch of sense, and I think he's actually could be a pretty good player as a franchise. I don't get drafting a running back for the year after. There's always going to be 10 running backs in the draft that you can get from the first to the 4th round. Every year, it's just like what it is. So unless you love Miller, I don't get it, but it's not for me to get. I think with that, we can move on to Mr. Spears. I think I like his situation way more. He's the backup to Henry, but with Henry's workload, he can easily become a major contributor very quickly. I think him and Miller were back and forth. I kind of preferred him over Miller for the entire time. I like Spears. I think he is that guy. He is probably on my way too early draft board, the 3rd running back I would take at this point in time.
Yeah, Spears. I like Spears. Obviously, all these guys the next few guys all have the same kind of draft capital. So they're all, it's just whichever team like them. I also like Spears. I think I liked Kendre a little more going into the draft, but it's really preference. O-line's a little rough in Tennessee, but I also think Henry's damn near, I think he is 30 once the season starts at this point. So this could be, and they did the same thing with DeMarco Murray. So maybe this is them signaling like this is our next guy. So maybe that's the value there. And then I think that's enough on him. We can move on to Achane. Probably more of a 3rd down utility back than a full-time starter just because he's so small. Like Gibbs is small, but he is so small. But like freak of an athlete, probably still helps out in a way like a better version of J.D. McKissic.
I think he's super interesting. I think his placement is super interesting just because he is the small, quick guy who just got added to the quickest team in like NFL history with Waddle and Hill and those guys. I mean, I think that we're kind of along the same line. Two guys we just talked about. Even if maybe I like his situation a little bit more than Miller, I think talent is there for Miller. But yeah, I think we hit on what we need to hit on with him. We're in third down running. We're in third round running backs. We can kind of move on. Next we have Tank Bigsby. I loved him at Auburn. I think he got into a pretty good fit in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a team that all the experts hated their draft. I really thought it was pretty good. So I know nothing apparently. But Tank, I liked him. He's a power back. He's got there with ETN. So I think he touches the field. I think he becomes a better version of what James Robinson was from them early last year. And so I like his fit as well. Again, he may fall right under Spears for me in value right now, but again, we're so far off of actual draft day that it's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a committee back, him and ETN. Obviously, ETN's got a lot more draft capital, so maybe they use him a little more, but he'll be valuable at some point for sure.
The only reason the draft capital comes in a little bit with the two of them is that these guys didn't pick ETN. And I doubt they would have. Urban Meyer was a fun hire for. Anyway, I think the last one we had wanted to talk about was Mr. Johnson, who was Bijan's backup and immediately finds himself as Herbert's backup. He kind of takes maybe that Demont role a little bit. I like him. I think he can take some touchdowns away. He can take some production away from Herbert. But it seems like you had some pretty good feelings about Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a pretty good prospect. I kind of always find these guys interesting that end up like backups behind like amazing running backs. Like I feel like in a different situation a little bit, but like Kamara was kind of like that, where he was just like behind like Ingram and then Henry, and then like he transferred to Tennessee. I kind of like that situation. And then I think Chicago's backfield's open. I mean, I know Herbert's been pretty good, but like he was a 6th round pick. I don't think he was drafted by the current people that are there either. So this is a guy that has more draft capital. They don't have to pay him. Herbert's contract probably comes up next year or the year after anyway. So I think it's an interesting pick, and I think someone drafts him probably. So I kind of like him. But again, 4th round running backs, like it's really up to like whoever your preference is at that point. So
I agree, and I think probably from Miller to Johnson, there's not a crazy amount of difference. Pick who you want, and none of those guys should fall pretty. Johnson should be picked by the end of the 2nd round. I think those are top 2 round picks. I'll let you go through the rest of the running backs if there's anybody else you wanted to hit on.
Yeah, I'll run through a couple guys quickly. Not going to run through guys on teams with running backs. I did like Israel before the draft, but being drafted on a team with Breece, I'm not even going to talk about him at that point. Breece is the guy, clearly. So if he gets any work, I'd be surprised. What?
I'm going to talk about him 2 paragraphs later.
Chase Brown, I think the Mixon, whatever the hell's going on with him off the field, makes the Chase Brown. I wasn't the biggest fan of him as a prospect, but I think the landing spot's pretty interesting, just the way the Mixon situation turns out. And then the only other guy there is Samaje Perine, who you can easily beat him out, I feel like. Then other than that, Deuce Vaughn's similar to A-Chain for me, but and I think Dallas is an interesting spot just because Pollard's the only one there and he's coming off injury. Don't think Deuce Vaughn could be a full-time running back, but I think he's somewhat interesting. And then Zach Evans is probably the steal of the draft at running back for me. I think he competes with. Excuse me. I think he competes with. Who's their running back? You have. Yeah, I think he competes with Akers. He had a great year. I don't know why people don't like him, but yeah.
Yeah, he was another one for me that I wasn't sure why he fell, but I think moving on to wide receiver, I think we can try and blow through wide receivers a little quicker, just because, have our feelings and move on. First, JSN. Not sure why Seattle took him. He's a third option. I hated Seattle's draft, if you couldn't tell. But will play out of the slot. Don't love him as much as the Ohio State wide receivers last year. Definitely don't love him as much as the Ohio State receiver next year. Marvin Harrison Jr. is that man. You heard it here, hopefully first for most of you who maybe don't watch college football. That dude is elite. I don't know if Geno finds a way to feed all these mouths. He's now got 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs for no apparent reason. He's probably the first wide receiver off the board, but realistically, he doesn't need to be. I think any of those guys picked in the first 4 receivers could be the first pick in any dynasty draft. Their draft capital is the same. Pick who the heck you want. But I think most places he's going to be the 6th pick. I think in almost every dynasty draft.
Yeah, I hate the landing spot. Maybe I'm a hater, but just don't believe fully in Geno. Seattle, I mean, I get Lockett's getting a little old, so maybe his production dips, but I just don't understand where they're going, whether they want to be a passing team or a rushing team, because they're investing so much in both. So I just don't know what the plan is there, and I don't know if Pete Carroll knows what his plan is either. But yeah, I mean Smith and Jigba, I don't know. It's really up to you who you want. I think, like you said, all 4 of those guys are about the same. So pick whoever you like best. Quinn Johnston, I thought this pick was super interesting. I thought the way people fell on him after the combine was kind of weird because I thought he had a perfectly fine combine, and I was seeing him a lot higher before that. I like the landing spot with Herbert as your quarterback, like forever. The 2 receivers that are there right now are old, so I like the landing spot. They're old. Mike Williams is like 29.
26, I think.
No, he's not. He's like way older than you think he is, actually. But anyway, so I like the landing spot. I think he's probably got the best landing spot out of all these guys. And
I disagree with that big time. I don't like the landing spot. I love Herbert. I love how him and Herbert may interact, but they just paid Mike Williams, and it feels like what he's going to do is what they want Mike Williams to do. And they have a lot of mouths to feed. I don't see where he gets the touches that he needs to be the best landing spot. Here, I love Herbert. I love that he's a deep threat guy that Herbert could hit, but he feels like a poor man's Mike Williams. And whether Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are old, they're still taking away his touches for the first few years. And he's not my favorite receiver. I think he's a very good receiver. But the landing spot hurt for me, even though he does get Herbert. I don't love him having to compete so hard for touches.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I disagree, but that people are going to disagree on picks. So.
Well, and that's kind of what we said. These 4 wide receivers, pick who you want and run with it. The next one drafted was Zay Flowers to Ravens. So this is the fit I loved. I loved him getting picked here. I loved him going to Baltimore. Lamar is finally getting some weapons, but this gives them a 3 kind of headed combo, but not the same 3-headed combo that the Chargers have, in my opinion. Bateman, OBJ, and him, I don't think those 2 guys take away that many receptions from him. And then they do have Mark Andrews that may steal some from him. and the fact that Lamar runs. But I personally really thought that the Ravens selection was good. I think he, can learn from OBJ quite a bit and just move on. I think they can become less reliant on Mark Andrews and maybe less reliant which would for his help now that they're paying him so much. But I really like this fit. Zay Flowers was actually probably the guy I would have taken first, probably after JSN, frankly. But he was the guy for me going into the draft, and I liked where he came out.
Yeah, I like the Zay Flowers pick. I didn't think it was bad. I think there's a lot of mouths to feed there. It probably depends on what you think of Bateman. I think OBJ at this point is. I love OBJ. He's not the same. So I don't think he's someone that's just like, oh, OBJ's on that team. He's going to swallow up all the targets. I do look at Mark Andrews differently than you. I just think he's always going to get his targets. So I think that's a big drain on targets. And then it's really mostly splitting up the targets between Flowers and Bateman. And then OBJ will have his 50 or so. I mean, more targets than that, 50 catches or something like that, is how I see it going. So it really depends on how much they want to run Lamar versus throw. I would think that they're going to push the running back a lot, but it's a wait-and-see game, so.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's so interesting because I think all 12 of us should have different opinions on how these 4 wide receivers go. The next one being Jordan Addison. This is another guy that I probably would never draft in this league just because I can't stand having 2 Vikings receivers. And Justin Jefferson can retire and won't be cut from my team because I love that man. But I like Jordan Addison. I think I remember telling you when he transferred to USC and it was Caleb Williams and Addison. And I was like, man, those 2 together, scary. And they were. I mean, he was elite at Pitt. He was elite at USC. He's one of those guys who's just open. And he's going to get a lot of single coverage and be by himself when JJ's on the other side. So, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong here. He's not necessarily the athlete the other guys are. He doesn't have the size some of the other guys do. But I like the fit. I think he replaces Thielen pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I love Addison. I've always liked him since he was at Pitt. But, yeah, it's tough being stuck. You're never going to be the number 1 receiver when you're on Minnesota. So that's kind of tough. You're never like, he just has it limits his upside because he can't just be like the dominant number 1 wide receiver on that team. I don't see any way he just takes over from JJ. So that's tough. But other than that, I think he's going to be very productive. So if you're going to get production from him for sure.
All right, moving into the second round. John Mingo is the first one off the board there. Feels like a Bryce Young pick. Feels like, you combine the rookie with the rookie and they grow together. He'll be on the field. I think he'll get some production. We talked about them before. They don't have the best weapons. He's not my favorite receiver, but I think production-wise and fit-wise, he ended up in a really nice spot.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on him. I was surprised at pick personally. I thought he'd probably go more towards the back of the second or top of the third, but obviously physical freak, so who knows.
Next, we have Mr. Reed out of Michigan State going to Green Bay. I thought this was a pretty good pick. I think he probably can get on the field day 1. I think there's a decent amount of potential there. Love is in some ways a rookie quarterback. And so I think, again, grow. It's a young wide receiver room. There's plenty of ways I think he can step in and take some of the spots that maybe were sort of earned last year. I think this is a solid pick. I think he can do a lot. And I think he's going to give you some pretty good production. I think I think we're now talking about guys that probably make it in the second round of every dynasty draft, probably pretty early in the second round. But I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, Like the landing spot. I don't think anyone's like entrenched there to just swallow up targets. So a lot of opportunity, which is something that should be looked for. So it's really up to how you evaluate how good he is. If he's good, he's going to be a steal wherever he goes because he's going to get a lot of targets if he's good.
Yeah, no, fully agree. Moving on to Mr. Rice, who was drafted by the Chiefs. Chiefs room is really weird right now, so I love them going wide receiver. It wasn't the wide receiver I would have picked. I don't know too much about this guy, but the experts seem to agree with me. This isn't the one they would pick, which means that we're all going to be wrong. He's going to be elite. But you give him Mahomes, you give him a receiver room that lost most of the production last year. Great fit, best quarterback in the league. I can see him jumping the guys we just talked about just based on fit and being with Mahomes. He's going to be a good player based on situation alone. He's probably wide receiver 2 right now behind Scantling, and that's crazy with Tony's suspension.
Yeah, I really don't know much about him, to be honest. But yeah, I think a theme throughout the years is going to be that whoever the Chiefs draft at wide receiver is going to probably be drafted higher than maybe they should. But the opportunity is just so good that like if any of them turn into the best receiver on the team, it's just like such an advantage because Mahomes is just going to throw for 5,500 yards every year. So those yards have to go somewhere. Obviously, Kelsey getting older, but who knows? So maybe Rashee Rice is the wide receiver 1 that no one's talking about.
I think that's very fair. And moving on to Marvin Mims, last second round pick of wide receiver. He steps into a really tough wide receiver room. I think it's a signal that Sutton and Judy are one of them is at least gone, but I don't know who. Feels like that should have happened already. If you were going to go wide receiver, this was an offense that was really disappointing last year, even with the great wide receivers. But Judy played well last year. Marvin Mims is a guy who I really love going into the draft. I think he is a steal. I don't love the fit, but he's a guy that I would pick pretty highly and probably ahead of quite a few of the guys we just talked about. I would go ahead and pick Marvin Mims. Loved him in Oklahoma. Think he's in an okay spot, but a tough wide receiver room to walk into.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was an interesting prospect. I thought the pick was a little weird. So I don't know. I mean, the way things are set up now, I don't see him touching the field, so it makes it tough to draft him high in Dynasty. Well, maybe touch the field in his first year at least. They just paid Sutton a boatload, so it's gonna be harder to trade him. So I imagine Judy ends up getting the one getting traded. I guess feels like they have too many receivers in that room, so I'm sure someone will get moved eventually. But it'll be a waiting game till then.
Yeah. Now we're into the third round. Start with Nate Tank Dell. Went to the Texans. All reports are that this is a CJ Stroud pick. Like he told the Texans, this is who you're drafting. Which, if that's the case, gotta love this fit. It's a wide receiver room that targets are going to be there. He can certainly step in and be a guy. He's got a bunch of potential. He was a great special teams guy. Not that that necessarily helps us here, but I think he steps onto the field. He grows with CJ. This is a guy whose fit I really love, especially if all the reports are that CJ Stroud was like, this is who you're taking. This is who I want. If that's the case, then Nate Dell should definitely be picked high. I think this is a pretty good wide receiver draft. There's a lot of good guys who kind of can come out of nowhere. There's no top end guys, but I think, from the 6th pick in a dynasty draft to the end of the second round, there's a lot of guys that can be taken.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously more of a slot guy than a outside guy with the size, but slot guys are valuable. So it's yeah, I mean, he's a freak, short in short spaces, so maybe that's what they're looking for. Mini JSN for CJ Stroud. Yeah, I don't know. It should be interesting. If Stroud hits, this is probably a good player, just because he'll build with him this year because they don't have anyone else. So it depends how you feel about Stroud, really.
Yeah. Moving on, the next guy was Hyatt to the Giants. It's another wide receiver, crowded. I don't necessarily get it. He's a downfield threat with a QB who doesn't throw the ball down the field. I like Hyatt a lot. I was surprised that he was drafted where he was. Them signing Danny Jones, I think, makes this a really bad fit for me. He's a big game player. Go watch him play Alabama. I like Hyatt a lot. Danny Dimes ruins him for me. And the fact that they made the playoffs this year really, really is miserable. But go ahead.
I disagree. I liked it. I think he fits pretty well with the Giants. It's really, I don't know. It's Saquon draws everyone in, so having someone that could just take the top off is pretty nice. I don't think they really have that. I know Slayton's fast, but I feel like that man is never open and does not catch the ball when he's open. So I'd much rather have Hyatt out there. I think that the interior was more set. They have Waller now. They have the slot receiver Wandale from last year. So in the third round, I think it's a good pick for the Giants. Team wise, not sure how much production he'll have.
Oh, I think it's a great pick for the Giants. I think it's a bad pick for Mr. Hyatt.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how much production he'll have for Dynasty, but I liked it for the Giants. So.
Oh well, I mean he can be wide open down the field all day long. Danny Dimes ain't hitting him, so what's the difference? Moving on to his college teammate, Mr. Tillman. I think this was a great pick by the Browns. I think he may take Donovan Peoples-Jones' spot as the third wide receiver in that lineup. I think I like Tillman. I think he's a good pick. I think dynasty-wise, he bumps up ahead of Hyatt pretty easily, even though maybe I like Hyatt maybe more as a player. But that fit, their draft capital is identical. So I think Tillman ended up in a much better situation than Mr. Hyatt did.
Yeah, I mean, better quarterback on Cleveland, so that's pretty nice. Not my favorite prospect in the world, but yeah, good enough.
All right. Last one we're going to focus on is Josh Downs. Love them in North Carolina. Love the talent. Love the fit. I'm telegraphing my draft a little bit here. Draft day, I'm reaching for Josh Downs. Probably too early, but I love Josh Downs. Love the fit. I think he's productive from day one. People may not like the size. There's a whole bunch of things not to like about Josh Downs. You are wrong. And that dude is going to be a player in the NFL. And I don't care what Mel Kiper has to say.
All right. Well, everyone remember that Chris is a UNC fan, so take that into account. I also like Josh Downs, and I do love where he landed because they do have two outside receivers already, and that spot that he's filling was filled by Paris last year, who was, yeah.
He's going to beat out Isaiah McKenzie for that job day one.
Yeah. Maybe not day one, but I think he'll be productive eventually. And then the only real problem I have is it's risky because I don't know how good their quarterback is going to be. And that's the risk there. And I don't know even if he is good, is he going to throw that 2-yard pass to Josh Downs, or is he going to just say, I'm going to jump over some people and run through some people? So that's the only risk. But I did like him before the draft, and I think the situation wide receiver wise is nice.
Right. Rest of the receivers, don't know why the Chargers went out and got Davis. I don't get it. Why? Charlie Jones, another one. I don't know why he was necessarily drafted to Cincinnati where he was, but that dude was a killer at Purdue. He is a good football player. He is one of those guys who's just always open. Parker Washington to Jacksonville was a late round pick who probably doesn't do much, but He was great, and maybe if he can find some time to get on the field, maybe it's through special teams. I thought that was a great pickup. And then last but not least, Ronnie Bell from Michigan, who ended up in San Francisco in the 7th round, was a guy I really liked at Michigan. Maybe not the best NFL player, but wanted to give him a quick little shout out before we move to tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kayshon Boutte is worth talking about, I guess. Drafted to a team with not really any receivers, so and he had a good freshman year, so maybe he'll be good. Probably not, but I think there's some opportunity for him at least.
All right. Well, now we're on to tight end. Start with Dalton Kincaid, 26th pick in the 1st round. This is a pick I don't get. I really like Kincaid. Is he better than Dawson Knox day one? I don't know. He's fighting for targets. I just don't see where he gets his targets, at least in the very beginning. Even with Josh Allen, they need to learn how to run the ball a little bit more in Buffalo. He's not necessarily the guy who's going to block. So he's just, it wasn't a pick I liked. It wasn't a pick I understood. I think that team had more needs. I don't think tight end is going to get them over the Super Bowl hump that they should be going for. But I mean, talent is there. This is a guy who should be the first tight end off most drafts. I mean, the talent's there. I just didn't like him going to Buffalo.
I don't hate it. I mean, I think Knox is fine, but Kincaid's way more talented. Outside of Diggs, they really don't have anyone taking targets, so maybe the targets are available more than you're thinking.
Gabe Davis doesn't take targets?
I mean, not really. I think he didn't have a lot of targets last year.
Well, he was hurt.
Whatever. He's always hurt. But anyway, I think the targets are there for him. I think they're moving even further away from running the ball. So they're just going to throw the ball all the time, and I think he'll be fine. I appreciated them jumping Dallas and not letting Dallas steal Kincaid. So thank you, Buffalo.
Fair. Moving on to the next tight end, Sam Laporta. Now, this I thought was a fantastic pick with a great fit. They traded away TJ last year. He is going to be their starting tight end off the bat. Gibbs is, they have a new running back. They don't have the best wide receiver core in the world after Amon-Ra with Williams being suspended. I think the targets are there. I think the production is there. I think he steps into the tight end right away. I think come dynasty drafts, I pick him over Kincaid just based on fit. And I mean, the capital is there. But I know that's not going to happen for most people. But I don't think it's crazy to make that move.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a good pick. They could use help in that spot. Again, they're just so much on like the weapons there. It's like so hard to decide like who's going to get the touches. There's just so much in Detroit at this point that it's hard. Like, I don't know. Can Goff maintain all these guys? It's hard to imagine it. But yeah, good player. I think NFL wise, it's a great fit. But
moving on to Mike Mayer, who I think not dynasty wise, but football wise was I think a better player than Laporta. I love this fit too. He's a great blocker, so he's going to help out my boy Josh Jacobs, which I love. Waller's gone. They've got some journeymen in the locker room, and we know Jimmy G loves to hit the tight end. I think he's super productive. I think that he can be a big-time tight end pretty quickly. And so I think the top 3 tight ends in this year's draft are awesome and should be taken pretty highly in every dynasty draft.
Yeah, I liked Mayer a lot. I liked him as much as any of these guys. I think he'll be a good safety blanket for Jimmy G, who always hits his safety blanket. So, I don't know. I think before the draft process started, everyone kind of had Mayer as their number 1 tight end, and somehow he fell to the 3rd. So maybe he's the first tight end, maybe he's the 3rd. I don't know. I don't imagine anyone behind him goes ahead of him.
No, I think the top 3 I can see going in any which way. But I love Mayer. I love Laporta. I'm actually less sold on Kincaid, but that's I think as a player, he gets all those classic like white guy attributes. He's the first one in, the first one out. He's the hard worker. All those. But I think it's somewhat true. But anyway, moving on to the next tight end, Luke Musgrove. This was not necessarily the pick. I don't necessarily love this pick. He didn't have much production in college, and he's got a QB situation that I'm not sold on. This wasn't the pick for me. Love with Reed and Musgrove. Just thought this didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much fantasy relevance to the Musgrove pick. I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Moving on to Schoonmaker, Michigan guy. He ends up in an awesome spot for him in Dallas. Like you said, Buffalo jumping, so they couldn't get Kincaid. I think they still end up with an okay player, but reality is his stock dynasty-wise raises a whole bunch, and I think is way higher than Musgrove's being in Dallas than Musgrove in Green Bay. I think there are targets there available for him. I think he steps onto the field day one as a starter. He was good in Michigan, and I think he does his thing.
Yeah, I don't know. At this point, just like I don't know how many tight ends end up getting drafted in our dynasty drafts, but I thought the landing spot was fine. I thought Dallas definitely needs a tight end, and they've gotten a lot of production out of that spot. Dak loves tight end, so yeah, maybe there's some potential there.
Yeah, next guy, Brenton Strange, Penn State product. So I watched a lot of him. I really like him a lot. He's kind of similar to Ingram in the open field, but he's a much better blocker. I think reports are they're going to do some fun things with him and Ingram both in the field at the same time, but Ingram kind of out as a wideout, which he sort of is anyway. But I like what Jacksonville did. Again, I love their draft. I love the weapons they've added for Trevor. But I like Brenton Strange. I think he should be picked in our draft. He's probably the last one that's a guarantee pick in our rookie draft, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, second round, he's going to play. I think there's a lot of weapons there at this point. I don't know how productive he'll be early, but definitely a project for the future that could yield you some good results.
Yeah, I think next two I'm going to do real quick. Tucker Kraft, why the Packers picked two tight ends in 2 straight rounds, I don't understand. I don't get it. It just feels like a waste, although I kind of like him more than Musgrove. Anyway, but last one, Darnell Washington, big dude from Georgia. I like him quite a bit. I was kind of surprised at how far he fell. I honestly think that the potential is there, but I don't know if he gets drafted in Dynasty. Maybe you take a flyer on him because there is a bunch of potential there, but I think with that we can kind of call this quits.
Yeah. I mean, Freiermuth already there. It's kind of hurt, but I feel like the value at that point, they were just like, how is this guy still here? We'll just take him. So
yeah, for sure. Well, with that, thank you guys for watching our draft analysis from two guys who know nothing. So we're basically like Mel Kiper and the other guy. What's his name? Todd McShay. Although McShay is better than Kiper for sure. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for being a part of our league moving forward. Thank you guys for sending me your money so that I can actually pay people because I forgot to do that last year because I'm a bad commissioner of this league. But here's hoping everyone is doing well and that we will see you shortly.
Yep. I like how you're pretending people are watching at this point.
There's a quiz on the end. The answer is C. And you guys better all put that in the chat right now.
Yeah, throw it in the chat. All right. Thanks, guys.